I've read thousands of student papers in my career. Some brilliant, some forgettable, some clearly written under the influence of caffeine and desperation at 3 a.m. But never, not once, had a term paper made me question reality itself. My name is Dr. Elliot Warren, and I teach criminology at a mid-sized university in Massachusetts. 20 years of lectures, research, and academic publishing. I specialize in behavioral patterns of serial offenders and the psychology of unsolved crimes. Nothing surprises me anymore. Or so I thought. It started with an elective course I teach every spring: Unsolved Crimes, Theories and Ethics. I assign students a final paper with a simple prompt: construct a fictional crime based on real-life methodologies and explore how modern law enforcement would investigate it. The idea is to push their critical thinking, get them to apply theory to simulated practice. Most students come up with fairly straightforward stories: fictional stabbings, missing persons, heists. But this year, something was different. Point one. Paper stood out. It came from a student named Daniel Reyes. Quiet kid. Sat in the back. Barely spoke. But his attendance was perfect, his quizzes near flawless. Not the type to draw attention. Which is why the content of his paper hit me like a punch to the chest. It was titled The Crimson House. A gripping, detailed narrative of a murder that took place in a small New England town in 2002. A woman in her 30s, unnamed in the paper, goes missing from a rental house on the outskirts of a wooded area. Her body is never found. Police suspect foul play but lack evidence. The twist? Daniel describes the crime in bone-chilling detail. For a fictional case, it was too specific, too real. At first, I thought he just did exceptional research. Until one sentence froze me. The only known photograph of the victim is the one left on the mantel. A blurry Polaroid of her in a red sweater, standing in front of the wood-burning stove. I blinked. That exact image, that specific description, wasn't public. Not unless you'd had access to confidential police records from the real unsolved case in 2002. One I personally worked on as a consultant, the murder of Lillian Cartwright. It wasn't just the photo, the layout of the house, the name of the nearby lake, even the minor details, the type of tire marks found behind the cabin, the phone call made from a disconnected landline. These were never disclosed to the media. Most of them weren't even in the public case summary. I reread the paper 4 times that night. Could he have guessed? No, not possible. I had to talk to him. The next day, I asked Daniel to stay after class. He looked nervous, but not guilty. Like someone being called into the principal's office for a reason he didn't understand. Daniel, I began, your paper is fascinating. But I have to ask, how did you come up with the details? He gave a small shrug. I just made it up. Isn't that the point of the assignment? I studied his face. No twitch, no defensiveness. He truly believed what he was saying. But some of these details, I pressed, they match a real unsolved case. Almost exactly. That made him pause. I swear, Professor, I didn't copy anything. I've never even read about a real case like that. I could tell he wasn't lying, unless he was the best actor I'd ever seen. That night, I dug out my old files on the Cartwright case. It had haunted me for years. A woman vanished from a lakeside rental. No witnesses, no suspects, no closure. I had done a behavioral profile at the time, one of my first high-profile consulting gigs. The family never got justice, and now this student had reconstructed the case, down to the Polaroid, by pure imagination? Or was it something else? I barely slept. My mind spiraled with questions. Could someone have told him about the case? A relative? A cop? Or did he see something? No, that was absurd, wasn't it? 2 days later, I emailed the department chair to request permission to meet with Daniel for an independent study project. I needed more time with him, and a reason to ask deeper questions without raising suspicion. In the meantime, I ran his name through public databases. Nothing unusual. No criminal record. No missing persons reports connected to his family. His parents were both alive, living in upstate New York. He was an only child. Psychology major. Normal. Too normal. But what rattled me most was this. Daniel's birthday was April 17th, 2002. The same day Lillian Cartwright disappeared. Coincidence? It had to be, right? But that was only the beginning. Because once I gave Daniel access to university resources for our independent project, things took a dark turn. He began asking me questions about other cases, unsolved ones, that had nothing to do with the course. He seemed drawn to them. Obsessively, so he said he had dreams sometimes. Vivid dreams. Places he'd never been. Faces he'd never seen. I told myself it was just a creative mind at work. Until he handed me another paper. Point one I never assigned. It was titled, The Man in the Birch Trees. And it described, in agonizing detail, the abduction of a teenage boy in Vermont from a case I had helped investigate in 1997. Another case that was never solved. Another case that was never made public. I read it 3 times, and then I locked it in my drawer, because that's when I knew Daniel Reyes wasn't just imagining crimes, that he was remembering them. And if that was true, I had to find out why, and more importantly, who he really was. The email came the next morning. Subject: We need to talk. Urgent. It was from Emma Caldwell. My stomach sank. The message was brief. Professor, I need to speak with you in person. Today. I think something is seriously wrong with my paper. She left her number and said she'd be on campus all day. I replied instantly, setting up a meeting for noon. I barely made it through my morning lectures. My mind kept circling back to her story, or rather, the crime scene she described. The broken clock, the overturned lamp, the cellar door. It was uncanny how closely it mirrored the Caldwell case, right down to the dog barking next door, a detail not widely reported, yet somehow present in both the real crime and her fictional version. At the T1203, Emma walked into my office looking pale and sleep-deprived. She clutched a yellow notepad like it was a life preserver. Thank you for seeing me, she said softly, sitting down. I need to show you something. I nodded and motioned for her to continue. She pulled out a stack of handwritten notes. I wrote the story based on a dream I had, she said. I know that sounds crazy, but I woke up with this vivid picture of a house, a ranch-style place with green shutters and a red truck in the driveway. There was a man inside, lying face down in the living room. I wrote it all down the next morning. I blinked. You dreamed it. Emma nodded. I've had vivid dreams before, but this one, it felt different. Like I was there. Like I could smell the dust in the air. I sat back, unsure what to say. I didn't think anything of it, she went on. But then last night, I Googled a phrase I'd written, something about blood near the fireplace, and a news article came up. I knew what she found. I'd found it too. The Caldwell case, I said. Yes, she whispered. The same layout. The same dog barking. Even the wine glass on the side table. I tapped my pen against my notepad. Emma, are you sure you've never heard about this case before? She looked offended. I'd never even been to Oregon before college. I swear I didn't know about it. I believed her. Or wanted to. Theirs. More, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Last night, I had another dream. Same house, but this time I was in the backyard. There was a woman burying something under a flower bed. Something wrapped in plastic. My heart skipped. What kind of something? I asked. She looked at me, dead serious. I think it was a body. That night, I found myself deep in internet forums, scouring every scrap of information I could find about the Caldwell case. Emma's dream about the backyard was unnerving, especially considering that the original investigation had largely focused on the interior of the house. But there was a footnote in an old police report. Backyard loosely excavated. No findings. What if they missed something? My phone buzzed. A message from Emma. I remember the flowers. They were white. Petunias, maybe? The ground was fresh. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I reached out to a friend from grad school, Paul Granger, now a forensic analyst working with a private investigation firm in Portland. We'd lost touch over the years, but I knew he had contacts. I sent him an encrypted message with a simple request. Do you know anyone still looking into Caldwell? His reply was fast. Actually, yes. What? We set up a call. I told him about Emma's story, not the dreams, not yet, but the fictional narrative she'd written. He listened in silence. Then he said, You need to talk to Ann Jansen. She was one of the original detectives. Now retired, but still obsessed with the case. I'll connect you. A week later, I met Detective Jansen at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. She looked every bit the seasoned investigator. Sharp eyes, stiff posture, no wasted words. I read the story you sent, she said without greeting. You sure that girl didn't copy it from somewhere? She swears she didn't, I said. She says it came from a dream. Jansen raised an eyebrow but didn't scoff. You'd be surprised how many leads come from unconventional sources. Then she leaned forward. She wrote about the cellar, didn't she? Yes, I said. She described the chain on the door, the smell of mildew, even the broken wine glass on the table. Jansen sat back. That glass detail was never released to the press. I froze. So only the killer would know? Or someone who'd been there, she said. That cellar was cleaned out, but we always thought it was staged. Too neat. Her gaze locked with mine. Tell me more about your student. That night, Emma came to my apartment. I told her everything about the detective, the investigation, the significance of her descriptions. She looked stunned. I don't know why I'm dreaming this, she said, but it feels like someone's showing me pieces of a puzzle. She pulled something from her bag, a charcoal sketch. I drew this after the last dream. It was a backyard, seen from above. A flower bed, a small stone angel, a hand, barely visible in the dirt. I stared at the drawing. It was hauntingly detailed. What if you're not dreaming? I said slowly, but remembering. Her face paled. You think I was there? I don't know, I said, but we have to find out. Emma didn't say a word on the drive to Portland. She just stared out the passenger window, holding that charcoal sketch tight against her chest. We had arranged to meet Detective and Jansen again, this time at the old Coldwell house. She'd somehow pulled strings to get us temporary access. The house had been empty for years. A for sale sign still leaned drunkenly in the yard, faded by sun and rain. The lawn had long since surrendered to wild grass. As we stepped out of the car, Emma froze. I've been here before, she whispered. I turned toward her. You mean in your dreams? No, she said. I mean I've been here. The inside of the house was silent, as if it had been holding its breath for over a decade. Dust lay in thick blankets on every surface. The air was stale, carrying the sharp smell of old wood, mold, and something sour underneath. Emma moved slowly, one hand dragging lightly against the wall like she was navigating by touch and memory. There, she said, pointing toward the living room. He was lying there. We followed her into the room. She stood perfectly still, staring at the spot beside the fireplace. That's where the blood was. Detective Jansen gave me a look, skeptical, yet intrigued. Emma walked toward the hall. Her pace slowed as she reached the basement door. I don't want to go down there, she whispered. Why not? Jansen asked gently. I remember a smell, and chains, and us screaming. I felt a chill crawl up my back. Jansen nodded. You don't have to. We can do this one step at a time. Emma turned abruptly. No, I need to go down there. The basement was dark and damp. Our flashlights caught flashes of rusted metal and mildew-stained walls. The cellar door still had the metal latch Emma had described. A length of old chain dangled beside it. She stood at the base of the stairs, frozen. I saw something in that corner, she said. There was a mattress and drawings on the wall. Jansen raised her brow. That detail was in the case file. Not public. Emma looked shaken. I didn't want to know this. We returned to the living room. Jansen unfolded a map of the backyard and laid it on a dusty table. You said something was buried, she said. Emma nodded. Next to a statue. A stone angel. That statue's long gone, Jansen muttered. But the flower beds are still there. The backyard was overgrown and wild, but the shape of the old garden remained. Emma walked straight to the center. Bed, kneeled, and pointed to a specific patch. Here. Jansen looked at me. I'll get the ground team tomorrow. That night, Emma stayed in a motel under an alias. I sat in my apartment, unable to sleep, flipping through old news clippings. That's when I saw it. A blurry photo from the original crime scene. In the background, in the living room, there was a book on the side table. It was Wuthering Heights. Emma had mentioned it in her story. He was reading Wuthering Heights, she'd written. Another detail that was never released. Was this truly a dream? Or a memory? The next morning, the ground team arrived. Shovels hit dirt at precisely 9:13 a.m. 89:47. One of the officers called. Out. Got something. Everyone went silent. A black plastic tarp. Inside it, remains. Small, frail. Human. Female. Jansen turned to Emma. Do you know who it is? Emma didn't answer. She just stared, trembling. Then she said softly, her name was Lydia. I think she was my sister. The DNA results would take days, but the early signs were already telling. The bone structure, height, approximate age, it all matched with the profile of Lydia Westbrook, a missing girl from Washington State who had vanished 16 years ago. Emma had been 4 at the time. Her parents claimed she ran away, Jansen told us. But the timeline lines up. They lived 2 towns over. There was no connection made until now. Emma sat beside me, pale and silent. I think I was with her, she said. I think whoever took her, took me too. We dove into the archives, and what we found next chilled me to the core. A foster family had taken Emma in when she was 5. Before that, there were no records, no birth certificate, no early photos, nothing concrete until 2010, but a psychologist's note from her early foster care file stood out. Child exhibits memory gaps, vivid recurring dreams involving violence and confinement, strong aversion to basements. The pieces were falling into place. Jansen's theory. Emma had been taken as a toddler, possibly along with her older sister. Lydia died. Emma survived, but with her memories buried deep until now. That night, Emma asked to go back to the house one last time. We stood in the backyard together. The stars above were cold and bright. I think she saved me, she said. I think. She kept me alive. I nodded. And now, Emma whispered, she wants me to remember. She looked at me with glassy eyes. What do I do now, Professor? I had no answer, but I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just a school assignment. This was a second chance. The days following the backyard discovery blurred into a chaos of headlines, lab reports, and interviews. Forensic testing confirmed what we suspected. The skeletal remains belonged to Lydia Westbrook. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Time of death, approximately 16 years ago. The local media exploded. Cold case solved by student's fictional paper. Portland professor and student uncover burial site of missing girl. We were thrust into the spotlight, and neither Emma nor I was prepared for it. Especially because the biggest question remained unanswered. Who killed Lydia? Detective Jansen reopened the Coldwell case immediately. She cross-referenced every resident, worker, and visitor to that house during the window of time Lydia vanished. One name came up, a man named Harold Greeley, a former handyman who'd worked at multiple homes in the area, including the Coldwell residence. He had a minor record: trespassing, domestic disturbances, one charge of unlawful confinement that had been dismissed. He had disappeared 10 years ago. I think he fled, Jansen told us. But now we have evidence tying him to the burial site. We're issuing a nationwide warrant. Meanwhile, Emma was unraveling. She began having nightmares again. Not vague, abstract ones, but clear, horrifying visions of a man's voice, a rope, a locked cellar. She remembered the wallpaper, the mold, the crying. She remembered Lydia singing to her through the walls to keep her calm. I don't think I was just there, she said one night, trembling. I think I was supposed to be the next. The trauma that had been buried so deeply was now surfacing violently. I urged her to speak to someone. A therapist, a trauma specialist. At first she resisted. Then, one night, she called me at 3 a.m. from her apartment. I saw his face, she whispered. I remember now. The sketch she drew the next morning matched Harold Greeley's photo from 2009 almost perfectly. Jansen took it seriously. The FBI got involved. The case went federal. While the investigation expanded, I was called before the University Ethics Board. They weren't accusing me of anything yet, but they had questions. Why didn't I report Emma's story sooner? Was I exploiting a student for academic or media gain? They suspended my teaching for the semester, pending review. I didn't care. Not compared to the fact that somewhere out there was a man who might be watching the news, realizing Emma remembered him now, and he might not let her live with that memory. The break came 2 weeks later. A homeless shelter in Reno, Nevada, flagged a man who matched Greeley's description. Fingerprints confirmed it, that he was arrested without incident. And when the interrogation began, he confessed to Lydia's murder, to kidnapping Emma, to everything. I didn't think she'd remember, he said. She was so small. Why had he done it? She looked like my daughter, he said flatly. The one who left me. No remorse. No empathy. Just twisted projection. He'd buried Lydia in the backyard. Emma, he said, was going to be his second chance. But one night, he panicked. Took her into town. Left her in a hospital parking lot with no note. She was placed in the foster system as Jane Doe number 43. Emma stood in court at the sentencing hearing. She read a statement, voice steady but eyes glistening. You thought I'd forget. You thought you erased me. But I remembered. I found her. And now the world knows her name. Lydia Westbrook. She was my sister. And you don't get to bury her twice. The courtroom was silent. The judge sentenced Harold Greeley to life without parole. Justice, at last, was served. Months passed. Emma returned to my classroom, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. Her story had become part of the curriculum, a real-life example of trauma, memory, and the strange ways fiction can reveal the truth. After the lecture, she stayed behind. I have a new idea for a paper, she said. I smiled. Yeah. It's not about a murder. Not this time. I nodded. That's good. She hesitated, then added. It's about healing. Epilogue. Her paper, The Ghost in the Mirror, was published 6 months later. It explored memory, identity, and how the stories we tell can uncover wounds, but also close them. It opened with this line. I wrote about a stranger in a dream, but she turned out to be my sister. Sometimes fiction is a door, sometimes it's a key, and sometimes it's the only way the truth can speak.